On day 28, we'll drive to Lincoln's New Salem State Park and then on to Springfield for the night. We will leave early in the morning, so we'll have plenty of time to look around there. And there's some beautiful trees along the way as the leaves are starting to change. We also see some electric windmills, and then we pass through Petersburg on the way to New Salem. Soon we're arriving in Lincoln's New Salem State Park, and we'll be here most of the day. They're having Oktoberfest, so they have many reenactments and many different things going on here. First we'll head to the Visitor Center and look at their displays there before going out to the town itself. Lincoln arrived in New Salem in the summer of 1831 and worked as a day laborer to begin. He had a wrestling match with Armstrong that we'll hear about later. Then in 1833 he was made postmaster and deputy county surveyor. He led a group during the Black Hawk War and owned a store with Mr. Berry. He was elected to Illinois' representatives, and he had a relationship with Rutledge until she died in 1830. In 1837 he became a lawyer and moved to Springfield. And after that the town really started to go downhill. Wasn't much there to begin with, and so it had to be rebuilt when it became a state park by the Civilian Conservation Corps. Our first stop in town will be Henry Ostadt's house. Next we'll move over to his cooper shop where he made barrels. This is the only original building that still exists in New Salem. It's now time to move to the Trent Brothers home. As we go along, they're making apple butter.
You help?
The Trent Brothers home was built on the original foundation. Our next building is going to be the school. It was also used as a church on Sundays. Here you paid so much a week to go to school, depending upon the age of your child. And out back they needed an outhouse. This one was a dual-seater with toilet paper also. As we move along, we come to Isaac Gouler's house. He had a root cellar outside. Robert Johnston was the carpenter in the area, and he made many different items for people that they needed for their homes. In the middle of town, they have a yoke of oxen, and you know what's about to happen. Deborah the Explorer has to pet. They want to be petted by the Deborah. Martin Waddell was the hatter in the area. 50 cents for a rabbit hat, $2 for a coonskin hat. He had about 5 children, so it was a rather crowded cabin, even at 2 rooms. Now we move to the Isaac Burner cabin and look at it a little bit. It had a sleeping loft. Now we come to the carding mill. As you look at this, you'll notice in the back that there is a turntable. They would lead oxen up this ramp onto the turntable, and then they would walk around and around and around, turning this whole turntable. Then the gears would mesh together and send the power into the carding mill, where it would card the wool. Carding pulls the wool and straightens it so it can be made into cloth and other things. We now come to the first Barry Lincoln store. Lincoln bought into a store so that he could have an regular income, and he helped run the store for 2 years with Mr. Barry. We're not exactly sure what they sold since we don't have any records of that, but it was a very small store. Moving on down to Lukens and Ferguson home, he was a leather worker and made many things including shoes, sometimes not as well as others. Outside they're making candles. These candles will last about 3 hours. The next house up was Dr. John Allen. He was the dentist in town. Let's listen to this interpretation of how he practiced dentistry.
He would actually just have you do a swish
No
of whiskey
whiskey?
if you needed it.
Switch of whiskey?
Yeah, just a swish of whiskey.
How to do it?
Or he would use medicinal herb from the garden.
Yeah.
But most likely a whiskey was probably your best option to at least numb you a little bit. There was
Right.
no general anesthetic. It would completely numb you. You would definitely feel the majority of it. But it was better than letting your tooth drop. Much better. And it was a very fast process. I mean, the more time you took, the more pain it was. So he was very quick at the extraction because that would require less. And he would also give you medicinal herb to help with the pain, or swelling. If you would definitely develop swelling, so he would give you something for that too. Yeah, because back in the day we didn't need a license to become a doctor. Anyone could practice medicine if they wanted to, and everyone had their different sort of like, this is the best practice. Dr. Allen.
The Rutledge Tavern was first a residence and then converted to a tavern where you could get a meal and a night stay for 37.5 cents a day. This is where Becky Rutledge's family lived. Next, we'll do a little shopping in a non-original building, the museum store. And now it's time to head over to Rowan Herndon's house. Rowan Herndon accidentally shot his wife while preparing for a hunting expedition, and he never could shake the idea that many people thought he actually murdered her. The first store in town was Denton AFET store, and this is the one that Lincoln worked in when he was here. He learned merchandising, but it went out of business within a year. Now we come to Clary's grocery store. Let's listen to him explain what a grocery store was.
Clary's grocery store. Now your next question is, where's the grocery, right?
Oh, sure.
Well, I'm going to tell you a little bit about it.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Some
some
of
of
the
the signs are down.
what they call
Oh, no.
groggeries. A groggery is a place you can go to get a
Try some
libation or a shot. Your local. And except in the anglicized word, the story goes, it became a grocery store. Okay, this is a grocery.
Oh, did he?
Which in England would be called a groggery, where you could go and get a cocktail.
Sure.
Or you could get a glass of your finest whiskey, or your rum, or your gin, or even a glass of wine, fine wine. Any of the hard alcohols for 12.5 cents, I would sell them for 12.5 cents for a little glass of it. And for the ladies or the men, if they would like the fine wine that we press out here, I've got a really good, probably 2-week aged one that I would sell you for 25 cents.
Which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but when you think this only made $12 a month at the store over here, 25 cents was a lot of money.
Back at that time, these two stores were the hub, the social hub for this area. These were probably the first two buildings that were built around the grist mill and the sawmill that was here.
Right here.
This particular area, a lot of the farmers would bring their grains up here to get the grains ground into their flour and their whatever else, cornmeal that they wanted. They'd bring their lumber up here to be cut. Mr. Offutt, when he looked at this, said, you know, this is a fine place to be able to put a store, because once you come up here, you're going to have to get supplies to take back with you. So it really served him. I myself, on the other hand, said, well, you know, this is kind of a neat opportunity. We're going to have people coming up here. They're going to have a lot of time on their hands. How about if I put up a grocery store? A place where you could go and get a drink. Or you could buy alcohol in any of the other stores here, but you couldn't drink it there. You had to take your little cask and your little keg and take it back home if you wanted to drink it. So a grocery store was the ideal place.
Special license from the state.
Right. Yes, I had to go to Springfield. I had to see the people down there. I had to pay them the money that the bloodsuckers. Never mind. That gets me. But anyway,
Some things never change.
that was kind of an entrepreneurial way. Mr. Clary only kept the store for about 1 year to 2 years before I went to Texas for more business opportunities. The Clarys actually came up from the clan, yes, came up from down south, from Kentucky, Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and Alabama.
They're called Upland Southerners.
Yes.
They didn't come
They
from
were
the Gulf.
kind of a rough little group.
Go Mississippi.
Pardon?
Go Mississippi.
Yes. Well, the interesting part of it was that there was a group of boys. I don't know if they were really Clarys or not, but some say they were, some say they weren't. They were called the Clary Grove Boys. And they had a fellow that they kind of ran around with, who was kind of their hero, called Jack Armstrong. And I'm not sure if you're knowing the story about All-American Jack Armstrong, but I'll tell you in a minute about that. Well, this was the social hub. This is where everything went on. So people would come, they'd come here during the day, they'd kind of, you know, this is kind of like the internet cafe of the time, where you can find out what's happening everywhere in the world. as small as it was back then. But the nice part about it was you could at least exchange ideas and see what was going on. Well, like I said, Mr. Lincoln worked for Mr. Offutt next door. Well, the Clary boys didn't particularly like Mr. Lincoln. They kind of bullied him a lot, especially Jack Armstrong, who thought he was just kind of a wimp. He was a tall, lanky guy, and they just wanted to egg him on, get him out and just beat him up, basically. Well, one day they were egging him on from the way the story goes, and then finally Mr. Lincoln said, "You know what? I'm tired of this." He goes, "I will wrestle you." Well, word spread real fast. Mr. Lincoln's gonna wrestle Jack Armstrong. So next thing you know, they looked up and there's 5 or 6 instead of them. There's now maybe 15 or 20 of the local residents now waiting for Mr. Lincoln to wrestle Jack Armstrong. The Clary boys made a circle, the ring, basically, and Jack and Mr. Lincoln started to wrestle. And it wasn't one of those quick over and done with. They wrestled and they wrestled and they wrestled. And what happened was that they wrestled to the point of almost fatigue when Mr. Lincoln finally took him down onto the ground and was about to pin him when Mr. Lincoln said, "No, I'm done." Got up. Jack was so tired, he just laid there. And the Clary boys looked at him and their hero had been beaten. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Had a lot of money behind this.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that was part of brought a big crowd in too. So anyway, the way the story goes and what we understand was the Clary boys decided they took him and they pinned him against the outside of the building, not this building, but the building that was here at the time, and they were going to even the score. Mr. Lincoln kind of looked at them and said, "Listen," he goes, "I will fight you, but I will fight you, I will fight you, I will fight you, I will fight you individually, one-on-one." I took a step back and said, "Whoa, it's not what they expected." He said, "We can respect that. We can respect that." Back then, man's word and earning respect were 2 big things in my life. And by just earning their respect right there, it kind of picked up the respect for Mr. Lincoln from people in this community at the same time. And you all know the rest of the story after that. But the interesting part was, it kind of solidified this community at that particular point in time. The Clary boys were still the ruffians that they were. Mr. Lincoln kind of gained a little bit more esteem and respect in the community around here, and the community started to grow. Like I said, my store only lasted about a year. Mr. Offutt's only lasted, I think, a year or 2 years. Yeah. As the town grew, things shifted. The grist mill moved further in.
And now it's time to head back. First stop is the second Barry Lincoln store. It was a lot larger than the other one, and they could make more money. This is the one where Lincoln became the postmaster at. Out back, they have a horse in the corral, and you know Deborah has the pet. This was another general store, and Hill and McNeil owned this store and ran it for a while before it went bankrupt. We next come to a 2-story building. Samuel Hill residence. He's the one that owned the carting mill that we looked at earlier. Afternoon. Now we stop for a demonstration of firing a flintlock rifle. Joshua Miller was the town blacksmith, and you could hear him operating many hours into the night. The Millers and Kelsos lived in a dog trot house, one on each side. They were married to sisters.
I don't know if hers. Ours hasn't broken since I've been out here in 2012.
Right.
No.
Well, the metal I thought would be strong. This reed is as strong as the wood, right?
Very good living. Doing that, be able to support his wife very comfortably, despite the fact that he's not officially employed by anyone. He works on his own terms.
How about that? Are they related?
Yes,
I thought so.
Nancy Miller and Hannah Kelso are sisters.
There we go.
And so the two families, they live together in Kentucky. And when they
And now it's time to look at the beautiful trees out in the parking lot as we get ready to head out. Soon we're on the road to Springfield. We'll be spending the night there before looking around at other Lincoln sites tomorrow. Soon we're arriving at our hotel, and we'll check in for the night, thus ending day 28.